I met my husband on a blind date. I was a brand new nursing grad. It was my first job. I was 21 years old. The girl I worked with said she really wanted me to meet this young fellow. She thought that he and I would like each other, and I wasn't dating anyone at the time. She said she'd already introduced him to other girls, but he hadn't been impressed by anyone yet, and I don't know why, but she thought that he and I would like each other. So the date was arranged after she answered all the questions that I asked her, and came to my door. I was impressed. He was good looking, he was slim, he was tall, he had dark wavy hair. He was well dressed, he had a shy smile. So I let him in and we sat and we visited, and Tina was right. He really was a nice guy, nice and easy to get along with. And we chatted all evening. When it was time to go, we made arrangements to see each other the next night, and then the next. We talked about all sorts of things. I learned that he was born at the beginning of the Depression, and he did not have a very comfortable life in those years. He was the second of 11 in his family. I was the oldest of 9, so we understood big families. He said his memories of Saskatchewan were not pleasant. He had bitter memories of the biting cold and the blizzards. He said most of his winter he would be all huddled up so tight because he was so cold. He would be like this for most of the season. He said when he let go, when he would come in to warm up, he said his muscles across here were so sore because he'd been tensing them for so long. Winter was not his favorite season, but there was always so much to do during the winter. It didn't take us long to decide that we were in love and we were going to start our own family, have our own life. So a few months later, we were married. We could only see each other on weekends because his job was digging trenches, working on a backhoe year-round outside. And he was working in the small towns, so only if he was working close enough could he come home during the week. But seeing each other only on weekends made life go by so fast. I continued working at the hospital, and he continued with his job unless there was a break in work. The second winter we were married, the town he was working in was east of Calgary. It was a cold spell. He was made foreman for the job and for the crew on that particular job, and they went there to work to set up. They had to hire somebody from the town to lay straw and coal fires on the ground where they were going to be digging the next day because it was frozen so cold. He was a nice man and he respected his crew. His boss drove into town one day and said, "Johnny, I saw those guys standing by the fire warming their hands. You can't let them do that." Well, that was about the last straw for John. He'd had words with his boss about working conditions before that, but he'd agreed to stay on to do this job. He quit that day. He was not going to be cruel to his men. That's why we ended up in BC in February 1964 with a tiny baby girl. John found whatever work he could for the first couple of years. Then he got an old backhoe and contracted himself out by the hour, building up a reputation over the years, building up his business so that he could give his children the things he never had a chance to have. We didn't have much for family holidays. We would take the kids to Alberta to visit with the family that we left behind. A couple of times, maybe 3 times, we did take a winter holiday in January to go to Mexico so that John could have a bit of a warm winter. We went to Mexico the first time with a travel agent getting us bus tickets from Tijuana to Mazatlan to Guadalajara to Mexico City, and then flew home. We didn't have a lot of money. We wanted to see the country and see the people. For the second time we went, again, it wasn't a fancy trip, but we studied some more Spanish so we could do better than just put out the palm of our hand with some pesos on it and let the merchants take what they needed. And we never felt taken advantage of. It was always comfortable. By the third time we went, we were climbing pyramids, we were sightseeing, we were having a wonderful time. Those were the warm winters that John wanted in his retirement. Over the years, he said, construction was a young man's game because he could tell it was taking a toll on his body. Working in BC was a darn sight better than working in Alberta or Saskatchewan, but it was no piece of cake either. So he could feel that he was losing time as he was getting older. He had lost friends in their 60s, in their early 60s, and he thought he would never make it if he had to work that long. Freedom 55 was his goal, and he would drive over his lunch kit with the backhoe. About the time we were seriously thinking of retiring, his brother was driving a highway bus. He knew someone who was doing a bus conversion, and he told John, and John told me, and I thought, that sounds wonderful. For us, it seems ideal. We can have the smaller home than we can afford. It'll be on wheels. We can travel all the time. That was very exciting. So when we could, John shopped for the bus. He found one in Vancouver with a tour company. So the happy day came when he could drive it home, and I followed with the car. It was parked in our backyard. Once it was parked there was no going back. We were committed. We told our kids we were going to be living in a bus, and they said, "Hooray, can we paint it for you like the Partridge Family bus?" We said, "Thank you, but no thanks. We'll do something simpler than that." We allowed a year in our minds to do this conversion. We'd set that time aside mentally. But smarter people than us told us we could never do it in a year. We said, yes, we're the Herles, and we really want to go. We really want to get it done in a year. So as the months got shorter, the days got shorter and darker, John was working out there all that he could, taking out the seats, taking out the interior of the bus, right down to the frame. He covered the entire bus, the 40-foot bus, with a tarp, and put a little heater inside and worked through the winter as well. One night, I was awakened by John having a grand mal seizure. I was terrified. I called 911, and it seemed like suddenly 6 strangers were in our bedroom carrying John out. There wasn't a reason discovered for his seizure, but a medication side effect made him very sore and tired and limping for a few weeks until that was corrected. So he lost time with the cabinet builder in the bus. He wasn't able to keep up like he had before. So it was about 2 years after we purchased the bus that it was ready to go. The house was sold, the garage sales were finished, the bus was ready for us to move into. I felt total relief to make a clean sweep from the house that we built 17 years before to the little house on wheels that we were going into today. As we drove down the back lane, I said to John, this is the first time I've been a passenger in the bus. Whenever you took it out for service calls, I was busy in the house. I guess I never was out. It's so different sitting up so high here. It's nice. Our little car was being towed behind us. We were going to the freeway through New Westminster and going down Front Street on a truck route. That's a narrow little street there, and John asked why I was nervous. I said, I'm not. I trust you're driving implicitly. He said, then why are you tensing? I said, I'm not. And then I realized I'm sitting up there so high. It's so close to the edge of the road. I guess I thought whenever we passed a power pole or telephone pole, I tucked in my elbow for fear of scraping it. So I learned to relax. One more thing to learn. We were headed to Chilliwack to stay at his brother's acreage for a couple of nights just to see if everything worked the way it should. It did. Then we continued on to Valemount. And in Valemount, we celebrated John's 61st birthday with a candle and a cupcake in the campground. Happy, happy kids we were. Very excited. On our way to spend the summer in Alberta and Saskatchewan to introduce our new little home, to revisit everybody, the family and friends we'd left behind that we hadn't seen that often, and to show those people who thought we were crazy for doing what we did that we had accomplished what we said we would do, and this is what we would be comfortable in during these next warm winters that we were so looking forward to. And if anybody asked how long we were going to do that, we said until one of us isn't having fun anymore. 7 years we lived in that. 7 years sped by. In between that, life hands you all kinds of adventures, including the death of both of my parents and John having a cancer diagnosis and going through radiation. Right in the middle of that. At the end of the 7 years, John was feeling that his strength wasn't there, and maybe it was time for the bus to be sold and let someone else enjoy it, and we would have a fixed home again and settle down. We found the perfect little home in South Surrey, where I still am. And because we couldn't stop traveling cold turkey, we bought a smaller motorhome so we could at least go for maybe 3 months in the wintertime, which we did. And then it was time to sell the motorhome and go where we didn't have to drive anymore. So we went on a cruise to Hawaii. Couldn't drive there. Oh, what a difference it was to be on a cruise ship. The cabin crew, the chefs, the ship's crew, everybody made us so comfortable. We had no cooking, no cleaning, no navigating. We were so ready for that. The next year we went on an Alaska cruise because you can't drive up the coast either to see those towns. By then, John was using a cane. It was a couple months after that cruise. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So more radiation after surgery. And a couple months after that yet, it was getting to be close to December, and he was in a wheelchair. He said to me one day, "Do you think we could go to Mexico for one more winter holiday?" I said, "We'll see what we can do." Within days, we had our 3 children, spouses, a teenage grandson, and one of my brothers, Ken, with us. And we were all going to Mexico for a holiday with John. We had a good time there. We're just being together, just being together. One day, John surprised me when he said, "Why don't we get that boat and the guide and send our guys out fishing?" We did that. They came back with a tuna and a dorado, and that was added to the menu that night. And we were so proud of that. Guys did good. And another day he said to me, "How come every time I open my eyes when I'm awake from a rest in our room, there's always somebody there watching me?" I reminded him that when he learned his care was palliative, that he said he didn't want to be alone. And I assured him he would never be alone. The memories we built will be with us always. A very, very precious memory that I can see so vividly is of my brother Ken sitting in the chair beside John, who was in his wheelchair. They were sitting with their backs to us. They were facing the ocean. There were happy resort noises all around us. The sun was shining beautifully on the water out in the bay. The little white boats were gleaming in the sunshine. And the 2 men were just sitting there in their muscle shirts. So calm, so peaceful, so warm, so quiet. I couldn't tell what Ken was thinking, but I was thinking that John was thinking, "Thank you for another time in having a bit of a warm winter."